Three, two, one, four. Welcome to Basketball by Association. My name is Arky Shea. That is the boy wonder, Joel C. Cordes. Joel, those numbers was me just adding every hundred of millions of dollars that we're about to give to some basketball players. I already have been giving some basketball players this here off season. We haven't really spoken since the Celtics won, so let's just say it. The Celtics won. And we were not really shocked by that.
We were staring down the inevitable at that point. It was a matter of if, of when, not if. So,
however, there is a new contender in the Eastern Conference now, provided no one breaks all their body parts, and that is by virtue of this here off season. We're going to talk about the newly studded and newly minted favorites of the NBA, the New York Knicks. That's right, no one gets past the New York Knicks this season. Looking at our 81-1. There's going to be an hour they fumble. I get it. We'll also talk about Joel C. Cordes' Minnesota Timberwolves getting better too. But let's talk about a team first that's getting worse. That's the Philadelphia 76ers. Paul George just signed with the Philadelphia 76ers for $212 million or whatever. So some big giant number he was going to get anyway. So, Joe, let me just say this. I don't think this changes at all how I feel about the Philadelphia 76ers. I think that they think that they're better. They gave Tyrese Maxey a boat ton of money too.
Which he deserved.
You
Congrats,
had to give
Tyrese.
him that. Absolutely. That kid was killing it this last year.
Yep.
So let me just ask you this briefly, and we can get to a few of the moves. I don't want to get to a ton of them because some of them are just, don't mean jack to me.
There's a lot of head scratchers. There's a lot of head scratchers out there right now.
So let's talk about the Philadelphia 76ers getting Paul George. Paul George, who leaves the LA Clippers, who almost won nothing with them, actually. Almost won jack squad of anything with him on that roster. What do you think of Philadelphia being his landing spot?
I like it. I mean, I know you're down on this one, but if I have the chance to trade Tobias Harris essentially for Paul George, because Tobias leaves and goes to the Pistons, where good luck to you, sir. You will be a veteran cashing some checks, and hopefully your team will win 25 games this year, maybe 30. For Philly, it is an upgrade. Paul George is still an effective two-way player. And the fact that he gets to slot onto a team where, yes, there are health concerns around Joel Embiid, but they're not the same concerns that you've had around Kawhi Leonard. And you have a young guy in Tyrese Maxey.
You mean the Costa Rican living Kawhi Leonard right now?
Yeah, Tyrese has got the keys to the car in every sense of the word now. And Paul George gets to be the third wheel on this team. And at this point, at 34 years old, that's a great spot for Paul George. That's a great role. Is it
going to be the third wheel? Like, I just don't think this fits well. Like, I think this is either this goes great or I don't think it goes good at all. Like, I think you're looking at a 500 team maybe. Like this.
Really?
I don't love Paul George. And
I know. I know.
He's a really good player. I get it. I just don't think he makes his teams better. Like it's just it's tough for me. And I don't care about the money. The money's not my money to spend. You guys figure out what a guy's worth. Doesn't bother me. I'm just talking about the player himself, right? Like I don't have to figure out budget issues. I just don't think Paul George makes a team around him better.
Here's the thing. I mean, like Philly last year under Nick Nurse, especially by the deadline, they laid out the blueprint of what they want to do, which is Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid surrounded by interchangeable lengthy wings who can play 3 and D. And they want that up and down the roster. They cycled through a whole bunch of different guys. Kelly Oubre Jr. re-signs with them, and he's the perfect example of it. Is Oubre a superstar? No. But can he play and defend multiple positions and do a lot of different things? Yes. Is Paul George arguably like one of the top 3 to 5 guys in the league who still do a little bit of everything really, really well and happen to be that body type as a wing where they're interchangeable? I think this is exactly in the blueprint of what Philly wants to do. And there are few better options of guys who have proven they can do it and who might now at this stage of their career, after having chased a ring their own way with the Clippers, be amenable to coming into a situation like Philadelphia and going, I just want a ring and I can make something happen here. I don't think he's that far outside of the game plan of what the Sixers have shown they want to do under Nick Nurse. And it's the same thing, by the way, pretty much that Nurse was doing in Toronto. It's just he didn't have quite the high-end Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid firepower to work with. No disrespect, of course, to Kawhi Leonard, who helped them get that ring. But otherwise, this is Nick Nurse's MO.
And maybe it's different this year. I don't know. But the last few playoff series, his plus minus has been minus or barely above plus. Like it's
right.
But
he doesn't have to be the first or the second wheel to deal with that anymore. Is he going to be more invisible than Tobias Harris has been in the playoffs for the Sixers?
Probably not. Like Paul George can give you 30 sometimes, occasionally. Consistently, probably 18 to 22 or so. Probably he can get you in the playoffs. That's just what I wonder about. Philadelphia is not in the market though. They're kind of like Boston for me, right? Like Boston had been in the playoffs. And more specifically for them, they had been to the conference finals and the NBA finals. They just had to break through and do what Philadelphia's been in the playoffs a bunch lately. They've gotten to the conference. Where is the Paul George? Is Paul George going to be the piece that gets them to?
Has Philly gotten to the conference finals? Jog my memory. I was going to say I think they've only gotten to the second round.
Playoff series.
Yeah.
Is Paul George going to be the guy that gets them to the Eastern Finals and to the NBA Finals? Is he? Maybe, but I'll tell you this. I know Philadelphia felt like they definitely need to make a move because the East wasn't getting worse at the top, especially when you saw what like New York did at the top. You saw what Cleveland was trying to do. I think that there's a decent chance it could maybe possibly work. But to the East semis, maybe?
This does not make... I don't think this makes Philly better than New York. Although we're going to talk about the Knicks and losing Isaiah Hartenstein, which I think is a big deal. I don't think it makes them better than Boston. But I do think it helps them not get lapped by those two teams. Like Cleveland and Milwaukee now continue to fall down in the pecking order. And where Boston and New York are like 1A, 1B in the East... At least you can look at Philly and go, on paper, and if everybody stays healthy, which is always the thing with them, but they've got everything. They should be the second, in that second tier, still above Milwaukee and Cleveland and maybe even Orlando at this point.
It should be, but I thought they would have been there if they had kept. Here's the thing, and then this is all I got on. I don't believe in it as far as getting them through, but from what you're saying, to keep them relevant long enough. And maybe if Joel Embiid's able to stay healthy, and we saw in the East, they got decimated by injuries last year. Maybe you run into a series like that. Maybe New York does break half their roster again, right? So maybe,
and Embiid's been an MVP when he's been on the floor, right?
So he's still good when he's able to, like you said, stay on the floor. Tyrese Maxey took a huge step forward. Maybe that team just wants to stay, as long as they're healthy, relevant to be in a spot to be able to
have a puncher's chance, right? Have a puncher's chance. And that's what I think Paul George, at least on paper right now, gives them. This is an upgrade over Tobias Harris and Nick Batum, because that's who's on the way out. Maybe Buddy Hield because of this too. But I don't mind if you had to do something.
I just don't know if they're in a much different spot if Paul George isn't the guy for the cash that they paid for him. Mm-hmm. But
and they're going to have him for 4 years, and he's 34. So I mean
Paul George has been in the league since what, 2011, 12, something like that.
I covered Paul George's rookie year with the Pacers when I was still with Bleacher Report. That's how long ago this was. That's been a long time.
That was 93, right?
It feels like it sometimes.
All right, so let's move on to some of these other moves that have happened. You brought up Shea Hartenstein, so let's talk about him for just a moment. He goes to OKC, adds some big man depth and ability and to them. I will miss him as a New York Knicks fan, but the Knicks couldn't offer him as much money. So he went where he got like another 12, 14, 15 million. I didn't see the final numbers, but he could get more money with OKC. Because I think the Knicks had early bird rights or something like that on him, and can only give him like 73 million. Blah blah blah. So he goes where the money is. Why not? Right? He had a phenomenal year,
and not just where the money is, but like the most dangerous team in the league, right?
Yeah, like number one team, and So, not the worst thing in the world. Although he could have stayed in New York, right? That was going to be a really good team this year.
Yes.
But regardless, go where the money is and a good team is. Win-win if you're Isaiah Hartenstein. That's a pretty significant loss for New York. But again, the reason he was where he was with New York is because of an injury. So Mitchell Robinson presumptively is going to be able to come back. That's going to be your one. So tell me, Joel, Isaiah Hartenstein going to OKC, bigger deal for OKC or for New York on the negative?
That is an excellent question.
Thank you.
Let me dance around with that one for a minute. Hartenstein to OKC, he's in a similar and maybe even worse situation playing time wise, because Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams have both shown that they deserve every minute that you can give them in that front court. But the depth behind both of those guys, other than the other Jalen Williams, was a little bit shaky. They were kind of patching some things together. Kenrich Williams is undersized at that spot. Mike Muscala, they had brought in for depth, but he never played. So I love Hartenstein will be in the rotation. He's going to get minutes. He fits their profile perfectly because he is young. He's 26 years old, but he's proven at this point. He's been in big moments. He's got some really unique things to his game, including his passing and that little flip half hook shot that he does. It's like a stationary floater. He's elite with that shot, as he showed, for the Knicks last season. He's going to really help them. So I think in a lot of ways, it's a bigger deal for OKC because it gives them yet another proven depth piece, but it doesn't mess with the deck of cards that they're already playing with. They didn't have to give up somebody big to get an Isaiah Hartenstein, but slotting him into the minutes that he's going to take is not necessarily going to take away from somebody else who needs those minutes out of this young, developing, hyper dangerous core. So I think it is a bigger deal for OKC, but it is still a big deal. It's a big loss for the Knicks because as good as Mitchell Robinson is at the things he does, which is rebounding, shot blocking, anchoring a defense, he can run the floor. He's elite at those things and below average everywhere else. Yeah. Hartenstein gave you the perfect yin to the yang there, right? He's not quite the defender that Mitchell Robinson is. He's certainly not the shot blocker or the rebounder. But offensively and passing-wise, just a completely different dynamic in that front court. And we saw how effective that could be in major minutes all season. There was some magic there with him being able to initiate out of the high post or flip passes from the mid post that I think got the Villanova guys going. It really meshed well with them. And so, you bring in Mikal Bridges, who we can talk about in a minute. I love that deal. You retain OG Anunoby. New York is stacked. But prior to Hartenstein leaving, I would have said, I really don't think that they have a weakness on this roster anymore. They have an answer for everything. With Hartenstein leaving, you now have one weakness to really talk about with the roster. And that is offensive front court production outside of Julius Randle, unless you're going to play small ball, which the Knicks may do. But what happens if Mitchell Robinson goes down? What happens if he's in foul trouble? You just don't have that dynamic because Julius Randle is not the passer. And he's a different type of scorer, though I think he scores from a lot of the same ranges as Hartenstein. You're missing that dynamic, and I'm not sure that guy is available to come in and bring in that skill set on the free agent list. You're just going to have to change expectations and what you do for the Knicks. And that's rough because Hartenstein was a big, big part of making the machine work on offense because you're not going to get it from the coaching side, right?
But I'll also say this. It is almost impossible to know what that Knicks team looks like healthy without Hartenstein having to be the deal that he is. I mean, they just got decimated from Julius Randle to Jalen Brunson in the playoffs, to OG Anunoby when they were trying to make their it just was just impossible to sort of figure out. So with Julius Randle back healthy and with Mitchell Robinson back healthy, you got to expect that Isaiah Hartenstein was just going to see significant minutes decrease, of course, and who knows what the value was going to be of that, because we know at some point Tom Thibodeau is like, I only have 4 players I got to work with, right? I only need 4.
Right. So. I do believe
and by the way, one of those guys that's played 900 minutes a game is now no longer on the team. So, and Josh Hart.
I do think that. Wait, Josh Hart is gone?
Yeah.
Where did Josh Hart go?
Hold on.
Josh Hart left the Knicks. What? That can't be. I haven't seen that anywhere.
Let's see. Hold on.
This makes for great theater, everyone, as we wait.
I thought Hartenstein. No, but I guess he's still with the Knicks.
Yeah, Hartenstein left. Josh Hart is still there.
No. Who is it? Okay, I'll look up what I was thinking, and you can finish your thought.
Yeah. So I do believe that the Knicks will try to replace some of this by moving Julius Randle to center, and this is a good tie-in because I think it does fit with the fact that now you have Bridges, you have Anunoby, and you have Josh Hart, all of whom are forwards. And you're going to play that rotation of 3 guys at your forward spot in Tom Thibodeau fashion for as many minutes as they can handle. And that means Julius Randle will play some forward minutes at the power forward, but I think he also is going to play center when Mitchell Robinson sits. So, like I said, Randle scores from similar spots in the post, but he's got some 3-point range. He's got some off the dribble ability. He's not the passer that Hartenstein is, but maybe that will be okay considering the new dynamic that you add with a Mikal Bridges. And I got to say, I mean, you and I have been texting about that deal for a while. You and I both love Mikal Bridges. He is a Swiss Army knife guy. Yes, was going to be miscast as a number 1 wheel in Brooklyn. Kind of saw that play out. He had a shot. I don't think that was ever going to work. Mikal Bridges is not a number 1. But as a second, third wheel, certainly as a 4th wheel, like he is over talented for that. And he's essentially going to be the 3rd wheel in New York offensively behind Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle. And this allows OG Anunoby to not have to worry about offense. He'll contribute where he contributes. Same thing for Josh Hart. Dante DiVincenzo is going to do his thing. Bridges is just, again, another interchangeable gap filler. He can play the 2 through 4 spots. It's a coup that New York was able to get him without giving up any major pieces of things that they, really wanted to hold on to. Bojan Bogdanovic could have been super helpful to them going forward. But the NBA is awash with a lot of shooters, and you can find specialist shooters, especially when Alec Burks showed, if they're able to retain him, that he's still got something left in the tank and can be helpful. So between Burks and DiVincenzo and McBride, and then obviously Jalen Brunson, you have a solid guard rotation. The forwards are elite for New York. The center spot is a little bit in question, but I have fewer questions if Julius Randle is going to play the 5 or bit.
I'm going to admit that was dumb. I was thinking of Bogdanovic for some reason, and I mentioned Josh Hart, and I don't even know why. Because my next thought was going to be about, for the Knicks, the Villanova boys, who now had Mikal Bridges, and we've already sort of alluded to and talked a little bit about them, about him. This Knicks team, I don't want to spend a ton of time on it because it's July, right? It's literally July. We got a ton of time to figure out what the finality of free agency is going to be, so on and so forth. But literally, I think we were texting with the Mikal Bridges and on draft night. I think it was day 1 of draft night. I don't know how you can't think at this point that New York is in the catbird seat to be able to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Last year for me, it was a bit of like, hey, they're going to have to grind to get some wins here, and they're going to have to beat a couple of really good teams and then get to Boston. And then they could probably give Boston a fight, but they never got healthy, so did a lot of teams. Now I think the East, at least as of July 1, midday, has opened up wildly for New York, considering what's happening with Cleveland, Philadelphia. I'm still very, very, very murky on. Orlando's gotten a little bit better right now. We'll see how that goes. And I don't even know if we really want to talk about Caldwell Pope going there too much. It's not a huge story for me at this point. But
it's a bigger loss for Denver than it's a gain for Orlando. I'll say that.
I think that's probably a fair way to sort of encapsulate that entire story. Okay, that's fair. That I don't think, health permitted, and with everyone coming back, adding Mikal Bridges, and then my heart skipped a beat when OG opted out of his contract, and I was like, son of a. But in the back of my head, I was like, I know it's for more money, but is New York going to pay more money? Like, they've got to see the value in that guy, right?
Oh, I mean, yeah, they were like 21-3 or whatever when he arrived. Yeah, I would think they would open the checkbook.
I'm growing up with an owner for this Knicks team that either pays way too much for very below average talent or gets cheap on some dudes that doesn't make sense. So I did not know what quite to expect here. But to give OG all of his money and to be able to say a day later, all right, he's re-signing with the Knicks for as much money as he possibly can. Perfect. This team's in the catbird seat, man. Like, Boston's clearly at this point still number one because they're defending champs.
They're the team to beat.
Now there's a legitimate roster-wise contender to them to start the season.
The Mikal Bridges move is a shot across the bow to Boston. It is a shot across the bow that says, yep, we're going to go toe-to-toe with you, and let's see who has this.
People were texting. I had like 4 or 5 people text me. It's like, okay, so you gave up like your entire future? I'm like, no, your future's now. Like, now is when this is your window. Your window's starting right now. Who cares about the 2025 and 2026 and 2028 draft? No one cares, right?
New York should be winning enough games that those are, minimal
aren't going to be big deals anyway. Like, this is the window. The Knicks haven't been to the conference finals in 24 years. All right. Do you know there's only like 3 teams that haven't done that? And one of them's like Charlotte, who didn't have a team for a minute and a half. Like, this is for a real team. Like, we don't count the Bobcats. So like, this, to me, this is, you can't be New York and not relevant that long. And it was a comedy of errors, I guess misses already implied, from like 2005 on for like contracts and trades. I mean, the flirting with New York, or the flirting with LeBron and Kevin Durant, that all never happened. Outside of really 1.5 really great years with Carmelo and Amari Stoudemire. Like, this 2000 to now run is literally, like, for me right now, this is the run that I actually get to have a chance to enjoy. So you give the draft picks away, give them the choice, if you can, conference finals, NBA finals right now. And the Knicks, for the first time in a quarter century, are poised to be able to do that.
Last thought for me. The Knicks, I've been on record forever. The Knicks are always a team that I dislike.
Yeah.
But over the last couple of years, I've warmed up to the roster because they've got a lot of players that I really enjoy watching, and I've enjoyed the fight that they've brought to it. But I think this is the first year probably ever for me as an NBA fan where I look at the New York Knicks and go, I like that team. I will watch that. It's not. Yeah, it's not that I'm lukewarm and I'll tolerate them and there's a couple of guys I'll watch. No, I like that team and I like where they're going.
And it's a guy like Julius Randle resurrected his career. Like, that guy was about to get out of the league. Jalen Brunson took a risk, not saying with Dallas, and goes to New York and takes a huge step, becomes a really likable dude there in New York. That roster is loaded with OG Anunoby. That guy is likable, man.
He's a champ, and DiVincenzo's a champ too.
And it's not a LeBron and the Knicks. It's not a Kevin Durant and the Knicks. It's a New York Knicks team that I think the New York Knicks fan base, especially the great New York ones, really going to enjoy. Really good, and they got a coach that I think a lot of people hated at the beginning, probably still got some issues with, and will complain about when exactly. And I get it. I still hate him at times too. Like, the Josh Hart minutes last postseason was like nuts, right? But that's the guy that's going to be able to coach this team specifically. And to think it all started really with the hiring of a legitimate coach in Tom Thibodeau, but getting someone like a Julius Randle and coaching him to change his game completely, to really resurrect his career. Then you started making that team a place where,
and getting a competent,
like a Jalen Brunson sees the light,
and getting a competent general manager staff, and giving them the power to remain competent.
That's not easy to give up that kind of power. Yeah, it's really not. I'm a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, and Jerry Jones always wanted to do the draft up until a handful of years ago when he gave it up to his GM, who he's technically the GM, the assistant GM, and let basically them control it. They got a lot better. And he basically took a step back, which is really hard for guys who want to be involved that much. All right, let's move on to your, what do we call those? The Timberwolves. Wolves. Plural is wolves, like roofs, roofies. The Timberwolves are, believe it or not, also better. Joel, I took a lot of time talking about the Knicks, so I'm going to shut up here for a minute and let you talk about your Wolves and how you were texting me that you thought you made some serious upgrades.
Yeah, I won't go in too in-depth. We'll save it for a different time. Like you said, it's early in the offseason, and I do want to get to some of these other moves. But I like the Rob Dillingham trade to get him at 8 from the Spurs.
Rob Dillingham, by the way, is a legit guy next to Anthony Edwards. Like that, Rob Dillingham is a scorer. He is a mover. Every guard that comes out of Kentucky sucks at Kentucky, right, over the last 5 years. And they're good in the league. Rob Dillingham's going to be one of those guys.
I really hope so. I have questions about whether he fits as the long-term starter next to Edwards just because of that scoring ability. But I think as the sixth man, he slots into a need that the Timberwolves had. They needed that gunner out of the guard position, and they didn't have that ever since Malik Beasley and Jalen Knoll both left. But they had shown that was a valuable spot a couple of years ago. Last season, the sixth man was Naz Reid. That can and should continue out of the front court, but you still want a gunner guard to come in with that second unit. And it was really one of the only weaknesses that Minnesota consistently had throughout the year. As good as Nickeil Alexander-Walker is, he's a 3-and-D type of guard, and you can slot him at either point guard or shooting guard interchangeably. That's a strength. But I don't know if he is a long-term guy at just one of those positions. I do think that as Mike Conley phases into the back end of his career here and gets fewer and fewer minutes, it actually makes sense to put Alexander Walker as the starting guard next to Anthony Edwards. Be the Ron Harper to Edwards Jordan, so to speak, skill set wise. But Dillingham then gets the keys of the car, theoretically, off the bench as that scoring combo guard, and I think that's phenomenal. The question for me is, can he slot into that role next year as a guy who only played 1 year at Kentucky? Can he slot into that next year already? Or is he going to be a G League guy where you're developing and you're kind of waiting? And
let me help you, Joel. He can't. Let me help you, Joel. He can't.
If that is the case, if that is true.
He was always recruited as a one-and-done guy. That guy's built to be in the league. Kentucky, let me just tell you this about Kentucky. Kentucky was a team that could have won the national championship this year. They were talented enough to win the national championship this year. But John Calipari, just a quick thing, had the number 1 or number 2 most efficient lineup in all of basketball. And he played them like 45, not 45, like what was it, like 60 possessions together or something. Like just an abomination of bad that he did not. That was bad coaching. That's bad analytics. Whenever they were on the court together, which included Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepherd, we won't get everybody for them, but their most efficient lineup, he played so little, it was embarrassing. Rob Dillingham can score. He can get space. He is an NBA guard. You're going to be in a good spot. There's a reason New York. There's a reason Milwaukee went after that guy and got that trade. That guy's going Minnesota. That guy's going to be a deal for you. You're going to write.
Yeah, I really hope Rob so. Dillingham. And in the case of they don't have to give up anything meaningful. They give up some future picks, and like New York, Minnesota's future picks now are not as valuable because this should be a team that's very, very good. If Dillingham can slot into that spot, it means there's an odd man out amongst the guards. Is it Jordan McLaughlin? Is it Monte Morris? We'll find out. I don't think that's a deal breaker either way. But if he can be the six-man scorer, I would love for that to tie into a Karl Anthony Towns trade this offseason. Move Naz Reid to the starting lineup, something that he's earned, something that he's shown he can play alongside Rudy Gobert. And even if you don't want to start Naz Reid, if you trade Towns for a guy like Mikal Bridges, because that's who I really wanted out of a deal, and now your Knicks got Bridges instead, but trade Towns for a Bridges type, start Jalen McDaniels and that new player up front along with Gobert. and go a little bit smaller. Bring Naz Reid and Dillingham off the bench if you want. There's a lot of different combinations. Much of it does depend on, is Rob Dillingham NBA ready? But I love that the Wolves swung for that, and the price that they paid was really good enough to be able to find out. I'm really happy with that deal too.
Yeah, I would be too. I would be too. You are still in it to win it. And finally, this year we will meet in the NBA Finals. How's that? Does that sound good for you? Finally,
I hope so.
One last thing I want to get to. They got like one or two thoughts on the draft, and then we'll get out of here.
And we're going to leave so many free agents on the table and not even talk about them this time.
Well, look, there's going to be a ton of free agent news that happens. It's going to have to coincide with each other. I want to get to the biggest stories out there, which clearly are minding your team. Even if I was talking about a 25-win Knicks team, it would be probably the number one story here. The Knicks are able to draft the 11th pick because they got screwed in the NBA draft again. Would you guys freeze the envelopes again, please? Like, that's all I'm asking. So, Chris Paul, waived by Golden State. By the way, Klay Thompson is going to go away too. But Chris Paul, waived by Golden State. And then, swooping in, are the San Antonio, are we smarter than everyone else, Spurs? So, Joel, my quick thought on this. Chris Paul, I don't know what good he was going to do on Golden State. Probably nothing at this point. He's a dirty player. He's an old player, but he is a veteran, still pretty good player, even in reduced minutes. I don't like him in a lot of spots, but it feels like as a veteran, like a dirty Wiley veteran, kind of makes sense in San Antonio. What do you think?
If he's raising the white flag on getting a ring for his career, he's unfortunately going to be a guy who just doesn't have it and is a first ballot Hall of Famer. So that's tough to stare that down. He had chased a ring, and he must have made the decision that chasing a ring wasn't what he wanted to do anymore. But yeah, as somebody
who else would like to be honest, I don't know what contenders would have brought on Chris Paul at this point.
They're out there.
Like legit title contenders, not just get to the playoffs, maybe get to the semis.
Where he would have gotten a ton of minutes too. I don't know. And maybe he's not looking for a ton of minutes anymore. I think in San Antonio, it'll be a timeshare with Trey Jones and Castle and whoever else they want.
A young, fun team with a superstar, just potential face of the league.
Yeah, duper star.
Yeah, something like he can stay relevant,
right?
And he could be the dude alley-ooping to the 75-foot tall man,
and a multi-time All-Star. I think in Devin Vassell by the time his career's done. You've got some.
I don't think he leads the SportsCenter headlines. To be honest with you,
you've got Keldon Johnson. You've got
a good team, a good
team. Jeremy Sohan stays there. They've got some pieces, and now you get a guy who can help show them the ropes. And it's going to hold them accountable. That's the thing, too. Chris Paul has been very he's been abrasive as a leader over time, but he really doesn't take crap and to work with young guys. And I think that fits in well with a Greg Popovich. There's a lot to like here about this deal.
The youth he doesn't take crap from, but the old guy done it a bunch of times. Greg Popovich evens that out just a little bit, I think. Not even just a little bit. I think he respects Greg Popovich, who couldn't.
Mutual respect, between both of them. Yep.
It's a thing where, like, literally, if there's going to be a, quote, coach on the floor, like Chris Paul can do that this year.
Here's a thought that just came to me, and then we'll move on to a couple other free agent things and trades. Chris Paul, if he wants to be a coach in the league someday, absolutely could. What better place to start potentially your coaching career than to come work with Greg Popovich, who isn't going to be in the league forever? And is there a scenario where Chris Paul maybe transitions from playing to coaching down the line and not just in the league, but with this San Antonio Spurs team, if the dynamic is right between him and the young guys? Keep an eye on that storyline going forward over the next few years.
All right, I can do that. The entrance into the coaching side.
But can you imagine Chris Paul having been your starting point guard, and then 2 years later he's the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs? I can actually imagine that happening.
Yeah, I could specifically on the Spurs.
Specifically on the Spurs, you get to work with Wemby, you get to work with Vassell and all these young guys. If the personality dynamic fits, and if Paul can learn from Popovich, this is a great spot to maybe jump into NBA coaching if that's what he wants. And if you already have the pre-existing relationships and respect, that would be a no-brainer to get Chris Paul into your coaching ranks, maybe even as your head coach. We'll see. They like to make point guards head coaches.
That's fair, Jason Kidd. Let me ask. Okay, so is there something else free agency you wanted to mention? Because I had like 1.5 thoughts on the draft.
I just forgot to mention with the OKC thing, the fantastic trade of Josh Giddey to Chicago for Alex Caruso. Like that's yet another piece in Oklahoma City becoming even more dangerous. I like Josh Giddey a lot as a player. There's a ton of cool things that he brings to the floor, but it was obvious by last year that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the primary ball handler. You don't need Giddey to be that guy, which is what he's most comfortable as because he's not an off-the-ball shooter. So Chicago, in getting Giddey, really gets the same type of player that they wanted in Lonzo Ball. And they're probably never going to get Ball back, but they get a ball-dominant guard who will set the table for everyone else and is a good defender and is big. Josh Giddey is a clone in a lot of ways to what Lonzo Ball does best. For OKC, you get an off-the-ball guy who's an elite defender who fits in much better with that starting five. You didn't give up anything that you weren't thinking about getting rid of already, and now you add Isaiah Hartenstein. The Thunder, they're dangerous, man. The most dangerous team in the league.
Yeah, and then they got their comeuppance last year, so this could be that year that maybe that they got the Hurtons, and now they get the feel betters.
Yeah.
Real quick, I just did want to mention Klay Thompson being sort of said bye-bye. 13 years in one spot, pretty darn good, but he's obviously been a shell of what he's formerly been. It's been reported that the first teams he was going to talk to were the Clippers, the Lakers, the 76ers, and the Mavericks. And apparently LeBron James immediately started talking to Klay Thompson afterwards. Just a sentence or two, where do you think he ends up?
Either Dallas or the Lakers. With Paul George leaving, there's no reason to go to the Clippers at this point unless you want the money and you want the playing time, and maybe Klay does. There's no room left in Philly for Klay Thompson unless he's taking a massive pay cut to go somewhere. And if you're going to take the massive pay cut...
Chris Paul went, 1 year, $11 million from a $30 million.
Right.
Yeah.
And if he's willing to do that, I still don't know that it makes the most sense to do that in Philly. You're going to take that massive pay cut. I think you do go to the Lakers and you see how that fits. Klay Thompson is from LA. His dad played for the Lakers. I think it's either them or the Mavericks. If the Lakers don't have the minutes and they don't have the money, and maybe Dallas comes in with a really intriguing, pitch, but Dallas has never been able to land those free agents that they get in on these conversations. Historically, they don't get those guys.
But Klay's not a big free agent right now. Like Klay is he's a good free agent.
Yeah.
But he's not one of those big ones. And you've got a superstar in the league and a Kyrie Irving who has rehabbed just about everything he can in this league, including his image. So
either place he goes, Klay Thompson just becomes a spot-up shooter now who no longer needs to run around a bunch of screens, worry about having to be one of the best defenders in the league. He just has to go out and knock down shots, which was a problem in Golden State last year, but he was still being asked to do more than just shoot. And now he's going to enter that shooting specialist role of his career.
All right. To the NBA draft, we go briefly. Not a big draft, not a crazy, fun, interesting draft to be able to watch. But the top story clearly is Bronny going to the Lakers. And by the way, shocker, no one saw LeBron James's son going to LeBron James's team. Can you believe even late in the second round? That was crazy. I'll tell you this. Tim Legler had the funniest, I think, take on this. Did you see Tim Legler's take on this?
I did not. No, I was on the road.
So there was a team that was back into the second round, but ahead of the Lakers, and it was the Boston Celtics. And Tim Legler said, look, I love true crime, and I love these kind of stuff. You do a straight up kidnapping here. You hold for ransom. You take Bronny James and you talk to the Lakers and you say, give me everything you got. You want Bronny James, come and get him. Give us something for him.
Yeah, they should.
And it would have been a really funny thing for the Lakers to have that ransom brought by the Celtics. Pretty fun stuff from Tim Laker. I love Tim Laker. I think he's a phenomenal basketball analyst. But your thoughts? Anything shock you there for LeBron to get his son to play on his team? The homecoming we thought we'd never get.
Oh yeah,
everyone predicted we get.
I'm happy in a way that this actually gets to happen from a historical footnote standpoint. It's a cool thing. LeBron has been in the league long enough. It's cool that this works out. As far as Bronny, the basketball player, goes, I think he'll show some flashes over the next couple of years while dad is there. I'm not convinced that Bronny is a great prospect by any means, which is why he was taken 55th. And if he didn't have that same last name, if he didn't have his dad, maybe taking a pay cut and whatever to stay with the Lakers, and this was part of the deal to make that happen. If those things, he's probably undrafted, right? He probably is going to have to be a training camp player. And where does he go from there? So this idea that like Bronny James is going to have a big career because he starts out with his dad. No, he may be a guy who's in the league 6-7 years total because of his last name that gets him a seat at the table. Which is a good
career. No,
it is a good career. And
I think a lot of money. The influx of money into this league just keeps ballooning. Like
he'll show some flashes. And if he has his dad's work ethic and if he has his dad's basketball intelligence, even at a fraction of what LeBron has, you never know. He may overachieve and become a pretty valuable role player over time, maybe even a upper rotation guy. It is possible. But yeah, I think it's a no-brainer for the Lakers. A second-round pick to ensure that you keep LeBron and to stay relevant. You take that every single time. Good move for everybody involved. I wish them the best. And we all roll our eyes because, we knew this was going to happen.
And let's be frank. JJ Redick's the coach. All right? Someone's going to get their way.
We could spend an entire show on... Yeah, JJ, I think you made a mistake in signing here.
Someone is going to get control of a decision every now and then. And listen, it's not a dumb one to make for a second round. Like second rounders flail out all the time, right? So why not make it on a chance to make your son, who is a decent basketball player, wasn't a super elite recruit.
Yeah, he's got some skills. He's
It's doable, right? Like it's doable to be someone who could be formidable in the league for a little while.
Will he be able to come in and learn what his role and his identity is apart from his dad? Like where he fits in the NBA universe, because he's going to have to define what type of NBA player he is. Not just talented, lanky swingman, but what does he actually do at an NBA level, and what role can he be slotted into? That's going to be the big question for Bronny. And is being with dad going to help or hurt that maturation process? We don't have the answer to that, but that's going to be over the next 3-4 years where we find out.
Okay, I think so too. By the way, way before all of this, way before, I was projecting what the Knicks might do. The Knicks might lose OG Anunoby. He might opt out. The Knicks may also not pay for him. Who knew what was going to happen with Isaiah Hartenstein? This all made just sort of thinking out loud.
Yep.
LeBron could have opted out, and he did, of his player deal for this year. By the way, he did. It was really funny after the draft. Could have been like a really funny moment. Take LeBron's baby and then opt out and not come back. But it was all for more money. I thought that I was going to, for the first time, want LeBron to come to New York and the Knicks to make a push. And then if they had to spend one of their picks on Bronny, that's fine by me. But I thought if you lost Hartenstein and you lost Anunoby, if you wanted to try to stay relevant this year and to make a push for this year for the championship, I would have been okay with the Knicks going after that if LeBron, because it's a very short-term kind of deal. But
if it makes you feel any better, I would have been okay with LeBron signing in Minnesota too. And I think most fans would say I would have been okay. I would have allowed it this one time. To be fair, I didn't come to my team.
When the Knicks were recording it before, I didn't want it before because the Knicks weren't good enough.
Right.
Like it was just going to be like, hey, the Knicks jerseys on SportsCenter all the time because LeBron's dunking, which is cool. But like the Knicks weren't better or good enough to be anything above really a 500 team maybe at the time. So, but this year, just if all of those bad things had happened for New York, then I would have been like, okay, you need a guy who can start and play all these games. You need a guy that can score. You need a guy that can be a leader. Let LeBron James come in with Mitchell and with Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, and you could have a really great team for 2 years. So, okay, last thought I had on the draft. How about I like Zach Edey going to Memphis, and to me, it's only for one reason. This draft sucked, man. This was not a cheap draft. So, outside of probably the top 4 or 5 picks, there are going to be a diamond show up here or there. But if you're Memphis and you're getting back into the relevancy game, which you are, would you think that you might be budding to be a pretty good team getting back there again? Why not take the capital, the short-term capital, and the lower-end capital to spend on the biggest guy in the draft that's got 4 years of high-level college basketball experience and that can come in and from day one contribute something? Right, because there wasn't a lot behind Zach Edey that was going to make much of a difference, I think, to that team. So for me, I thought Memphis signing Zach Edey in a very shallow draft made 1,000% sense to me. I thought that was the best pick of the night.
They've had success with big bruising centers in Steven Adams, Steven Adams, Jonas Valanciunas, and obviously you go back to like the Zach Randolph and Marc Gasol days. But for this particular team, it's been shown time and again that Jaren Jackson Jr. would rather play the 4 than the 5. He'll do it when called upon, but like Anthony Davis, he does better when he's at the 4. And the rest of the guys behind him, whether it's Vince Williams Jr., Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark, they got a lot of great forward depth. They just didn't have that big body in a Western Conference that is filled now with really scary center combinations. And the Eastern Conference has great centers too, but if you're going to run into Jokic and you're going to run into Gobert and Towns and all of these other groups like, and Anthony Davis who's playing center, you need to have one of those big bodies. And if nothing else, if Edey can contribute a couple of blocks, a couple of rebounds and his fouls and, burn some minutes or eat some minutes, I should say, that Jaren Jackson doesn't have to spend at the 5, who he's also a foul trouble player. Like that's the one bugaboo about Triple J is he is a high fouling defensive player. Yeah, it works. And at that spot, like you said, there wasn't a no-brainer type of guy.
4 years, $26 million to be able to do that level. Because 4 years is a good window right now for Memphis.
Yeah.
So 4 years to figure out if this guy can be able to eat up those fouls, can be good defensively for you. They can get those big arms up. Look, he may not be super fast. He may not be a great shooter, but that's okay. Not everybody is. You don't have to be all of that. You can cater to that just a little bit.
Can he survive, being put into NBA pick and rolls endlessly? Because that's what they're going to do. Memphis is going to have to get creative to protect him. The good news is it is a dynamite defensive team that is well coached, that responds well to coaching, that does a lot of defensive game plans. It's a good unit to be able to protect Zach Edey while also asking him to protect the basket. It's a particularly good team to be able to do that. And look, they will only go as far as John Morant is going to be able to take them.
Sure.
And it will be dependent on Desmond Bane and Triple J staying healthy as well. But they got a lot of depth. They got a lot of young guys, and they're all kind of cut from the same cloth. It is another hard-nosed but athletic team. And like I've said, old Memphis Grizzlies teams would take you to the back alley and beat the crap out of you. The new Memphis Grizzlies take you to the back alley, beat the crap out of you, and then go smooth talk your girl. Like that is this Grizzlies team. And Zach Edey, I think, can provide the same thing that they had hoped for with Steven Adams and that they got with Valanciunas.
And you're right. There was nobody in this draft that was going to be able to substitute for what Ja Morant's going to be able to be. Like if Ja Morant's not the Ja Morant of 2 years ago, this team's not going to be great. There's nobody in the draft that's going to change that. There's not a single person. So to be able to take this quote unquote high risk, because some people had him projected like early second round or something. It's like,
right. I saw him anywhere from top 3. I saw him anywhere from top 3 to undrafted.
Yeah.
That's pretty rare that you get that wide of a range with anybody, especially somebody as high profile as Zach Edey. That was crazy.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Memphis is a great spot to do it. Like, I don't know if there are more than 3 or 4 teams I think would have been really, really suited for someone like that. But Memphis is a great spot to give it a shot. So, all right, Joel, that's going to do it for us. Say goodbye to the good people.
Goodbye, good people. If you want the video version, you can find us on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff over there. If you want the audio-only version, we are on Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. This has been Basketball by Association. We'll talk more about all the other free agent stuff next time.